This is a Vault exclusive. Not a shirt I typically wear on my main channel, although it's got writing on it, but I apologize. Too lazy to change it. And these complaint videos I shoot for Fridays often occur at the intersection of my laziness and Thursday. Meaning that, oh, tomorrow's Friday. Quick, grab that complaint sheet and see if you've got enough for a video. I get a lot of complaints from people who say that I repeat myself. I repeat myself. Now, here's the thing. I get emails from people who say, Steve, you repeat yourself. People comment beneath the videos, hey, Steve, you repeat yourself. And sometimes people write in the third person, hey, this guy's repeating himself. Well, among other things, to tell a story properly with a beginning and an end and a story arc that's in the middle, you often have to repeat yourself to remind people what you're talking about. And a lot of times when I repeat myself, I'm actually bringing up something and clarifying it. So it makes more sense. But I get between 200 and 300,000 downloads a day on my channel. And I'll get one person who goes, hey, this guy's repeating himself like it's a problem. If it's a problem for you, don't watch. I'm sorry. But I actually had a guy wrote this big, long thing. I should have saved it. But he actually wrote, you're repeating yourself for the algorithm. Now, talk about somebody who doesn't know what the algorithm is. And by the way, in case you don't know, there is a concept that YouTube promotes certain videos over other videos and certain things that help your video and certain things that hurt your video. And they talk about that collectively as the algorithm. This guy says, I'm repeating myself for the algorithm, as if the algorithm actually takes into account how often you repeat yourself. And the more often you repeat yourself, the more YouTube will promote your videos. Ironically, what helps you is if somebody posts a comment, whether it's good or bad, that actually helps you. So for the algorithm, yeah, this guy's helping me, but I'm not repeating myself for the algorithm. But he's doing this for the algorithm. Doesn't know what the algorithm is. It's like when Kramer says, well, you just write it off. And Jerry goes, you don't even know what that means, do you? Kramer's like, oh, you write it off. Like, yeah, he's repeating himself for the algorithm. I did the video about the cable company getting a gigantic jury verdict against them. And I did one video where I told the original story about what happened that caused a jury to come back and award $7 billion against a cable company on behalf of a plaintiff. And I did that video a while back. And in the video I said, chances are on appeal or in a post-judgment motion, this judgment amount will get reduced on appeal. It almost always happens. And sure enough, it got reduced. So I did a follow-up video where I referenced the first video and said, but the amount got reduced to $1 billion. I got a detailed email about yay long from somebody who said, Steve, just watched your video about the reduction on the jury verdict. And he goes, you made a gigantic mistake. And he goes, and you're going to agree with me that you made a gigantic mistake when I pointed out to you. He goes, there's a reason that the jury awarded all that money. There were some underlying facts that you left out of your video. And so here, let me explain to you what those facts were. And he then proceeded to tell me all the facts that were in my first video. But he actually wrote and said, you left out details and it was a mistake. And he said, and this is a quote, I wrote this down. I assume you agree this was a mistake. I assume you agree this was a mistake that you left these facts out. Now, getting back to me repeating myself, if I had gone through and repeated everything from the first video, this guy would be happy. But guess what? Everyone else would have said, hey, this guy's repeating himself. So I can't win. But I sent the guy a note back and said, no, it's not a mistake. I covered that in the first video. I'm not going to repeat everything in the second video as an intro to the second video. But I assume you agree that this was a mistake. No, I don't agree. No, I don't agree. Don't ever assume that I agree with you when you're saying that I am mistaken. And that's the crazy thing, is a number of people who start off by just saying, hey, you're wrong, and let me show you. Instead of saying, hey, I'm curious. You said this and I thought this. Is there something going on there? Because surprisingly, quite often I'll say, yeah, let me explain that to you. And you go, oh, you're right. The number of emails I've gotten back from people who go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. But ironically, the guy who says, I assume you agree this was a mistake, didn't write back. So again, possibly trolling me, I don't know. But finally, and this is actually something that I have to explain, because once in a while I'll do a little throwaway comment where I'll just say something as a joke. And I'm clearly joking, and somebody won't get the joke. And this time it was three people who didn't get the joke. I did the story about the Batmobile case, and that was the third video I did on the Batmobile case. So the first video I did based on a news story out of California. The second video I did as a follow-up after speaking to the man who builds the Batmobiles. And the third video I did was where the case was dropped by the prosecutor as the end of the story. And I had pointed out that among the charges brought by the prosecutor in California was the misappropriation of construction funds. Construction funds. And I had jokingly said in the third video, it's like they're just making stuff up at this point, because that law does not apply to this case. And I said, construction funds obviously are not addressing the building of a car, okay? And I had one guy go, Steve, you don't know anything about cars, do you? Because F1 cars, they refer to the builders as the constructors of the cars. Therefore, this law obviously applies to the Batmobile. And there's like 16 things wrong with that statement. But the interesting thing is, construction funds, in the context of the law, I assure you I'm right on this, but I even looked it up just to make sure. There is a concept in the law of somebody misappropriating construction funds. And I'll give you the prototypical example. So you decide that you want to build a house. So you find some plans, you find a builder, you engage the builder, you sign a contract, and you say, here's some money, start building me a house. Builder takes your money and skedaddles. He's gone. Now, you'd kind of like someone to either build you a house or get you your money back. And in the old days, if that happened, you had to sue the builder, but he didn't steal the money from you, you handed it to him. You don't know if he spent it, so you don't know if he converted it. He didn't build you a house, so you got to sue him for breach of contract? And that's a really silly way to approach this because it's such a difficult thing. So you're trying to sue somebody for breach of contract, but they're gone. So many states passed laws that specifically address builders. And we're talking about builders in the construction industry who are constructing buildings, not cars, buildings. So the construction industry is addressing buildings. And if I walked up to you and said, explain to me what construction is, you'd go, oh, that's the guys who build buildings, right? You wouldn't say it's some guy building a car. But what's weird is, because of contrarianism being so strong in the internet, that when I jokingly say this obviously doesn't apply to someone constructing a car, somebody's got to go, hey, this guy made an affirmative statement. I've got to argue with that. So I had several people say, no, obviously, if you give somebody money to build you a car, they're constructing you a car. Therefore, the misuse of construction funds would apply. Three people actually said that, including the one who said that car builders in Europe are called constructors. As if what happens in Europe applies to the law in California as applied in Indiana. So just so you know, the misappropriation of construction funds goes back to a thing, and I was actually thinking in my own mind from Michigan. Michigan's got a thing called the Michigan Builders Trust Fund Act, MCL 570.151. The Michigan Builders Trust Fund Act. And that law says that if somebody is in the construction industry, the building trades, and you give them money to construct you a building, that they hold the money in trust for you. It does not become theirs until they finish the work. So therefore, if they misappropriate the money and skedaddle with it, you don't have to just sue them for breach of contract. You can sue them for violation of the Michigan Builders Trust Fund Act. And I knew that because I actually have friends who deal with this area of law quite a bit. I've also known people in the industry, that is the construction industry, and they ain't building Batmobiles. And by the way, the first sentence of the Michigan Builders Trust Fund Act says, in the building construction industry, ... So they're talking about the construction of buildings. Now I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Steve, that's Michigan. Maybe California says in the building and a Batmobile construction industry. It doesn't. It doesn't. And in fact, if you simply look up Builders Trust Fund Act, you'll discover that quite a few states have passed a law almost identical from state to state, because they based it off of a model law that somebody came up with, because this is a problem, as you can imagine, that happens all across America and actually happens all across the world, where people are doing building construction, and occasionally there are ne'er-do-wells in the industry who'll take the money and run off with it. So when somebody approached the prosecutor in California and the police officer in California and said, what can we get this guy for? What can we get the guy for in California? Well, breach of contract, but that's not a crime. That's a civil action. What can we get him for? Well, if he took the money under false pretenses, you might be able to get him for some sort of fraud, but then you'd have to prove the guy never intended to build a Batmobile. And the guy's built a whole bunch of them. So the fact he's built a whole bunch of them would tend to show the guy actually does build Batmobiles when engaged to do so. What else could we get him for? And so somebody said, well, what if we say that he was given money to construct something and he didn't use the money straight away to construct the thing he was hired to do, therefore he violated the Trust Fund Act with respect to construction? And somebody said, oh, wait a second, because I think that's actually what happened here. I think they're trying to argue that he has these cars in order and he's building them in order, but when somebody down here gives him money, that he might be using that money to pay for this car, as if that's somehow wrong. And I'm not saying that's what he's actually doing. I think that's what the prosecutor or the police were thinking they might be able to get some traction on. But the problem is, I don't know that's actually illegal in any way, shape, or form, except in the building construction industry. So if there's a builder who's building 3 homes for 3 different people, A, B, and C, okay? If he takes the money from the people to build A, and then he starts on B and he hasn't got money for that, so then he gets money from the people for C and says, hey, look, give me some money, I'll start building your house. Takes that money, starts building B, and then gets money from build. That would be illegal, but only in the building construction industry. So when they said the misappropriation of construction funds, it was funny, because they obviously pulled a statute that was absolutely inapplicable to the facts in front of them and said, well, let's just throw this in there. And let's face it, did they ever really think that the guy who builds the Batmobiles is going to come to California and be prosecuted because of the fact that he built a car too slowly for somebody? Okay? That was an absurd concept. The only reason it happened was because you had a lame duck sheriff and apparently a rich donor who could get the lame duck sheriff to do stuff for him, and a couple detectives who thought, well, we get a free trip out of it. Now, we're going to Indiana, but hey, something, a free trip's a free trip, right? So the point is that law had nothing to do with the construction of automobiles. And I had several people in this group here who are saying, but Steve, build and construct are synonyms. They are in the English language, yes. But when you look at legal terms, quite often, despite the fact that there might be a synonym for a legal term that's defined a certain way can have meaning that the synonyms do not. Okay? So when we talk about in the building construction industry, and we're talking about construction funds being misappropriated, you can't say, oh, well, that guy misappropriated funds building a Batmobile, therefore he's misappropriating construction funds because when you build the car, you're constructing a car. No. The statute says specifically in the building construction industry. There's no way that anybody's going to say, oh, yeah, the Batmobile is also a building. It was something that was built, but it was not a building. So there you go. That's the long explanation for how annoying people can be, because I can say literally anything and someone will argue with it. And right now somebody's typing and they think it's funny to go, Steve, I agree with you. See, get it? Get it? That's okay. If you thought it was funny, go ahead and finish typing it yourself. So back to the idea that I repeat myself. Yes, I do repeat myself. I repeat myself. Did it again. What are you going to do? That's going to wrap it for today. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.